Good morning and welcome to Behind the Screen. I am JM, your host, your guide. This is a show where we sit around, we talk about games and gaming, role playing, board games, war games, gaming things that bring us joy or that we find inspiring or that we find beautiful. And so today we're going to look at a game. We're going to start a little three-part overview of a game that I have sort of fallen in love with recently. And uh, then First of all, good morning to Rook and John and Tink. Good to see you all. And to all of you who participated in our online poll, I will be going into a look at Wrath and Glory going forward. Probably later in the month, interspersed with, of course, Savage Worlds news because we love Savage Worlds here on the Iconic channel. Morning, Padre. So, I love Warhammer, the old world. It's it's always been a deep and abiding love for me. It's a world steeped in the Holy Roman Empire and a lot of history, with lore pulling from such sources as Michael Moorcock and again the Holy Roman Empire, and just Tolkien. This mismatch of wondrous Grimsey. Good morning, Paradox. Welcome to the channel. So the old world of Warhammer Fantasy is this grim, dark, low fantasy, brutal world, as some people have recently put it, on 5 minutes to midnight. Right? It's a setting where chaos is prophesied to destroy the world, and it's always looming. Is this the time that chaos destroys the world? And it's been that way since it came out. Warhammer First Edition role-playing game really filled out a lot of the world. Warhammer, I think it's 4th edition, the fantasy battles kind of, expanded upon that. Warhammer 2nd edition, Warhammer Fantasy Battles 1st through 8th. It is constantly creeping towards the end of the world. And yes, as Padre pointed out, that world came to an end. They did a massive event in the fantasy battle side of things called the End Times. Nick Ash returned. Gods were thrown down. Sigmar possessed the corpse of Emperor Karl Franz. Sorry if these are spoilers for you. This is stuff that happened, I want to say, nearly a decade ago. And in the Charlton Heston fashion, they blew it up. Those damn dirty apes. They blew up the old world. Chaos won. Archaon the Everchosen laid waste to the old world, and it was no more. Which was weird, because I'd been playing fantasy battles for quite a while. And yes, Old World is supposed to come out this year. They've been showing off some of the new minis. I doubt if I'll get back into Warhammer Fantasy Battles, just because I have Conquest, The Last Argument of Kings, which is a wonderful rank and flank game that I plan on putting out a couple of videos on. I've got Oathmark, which is another rank and flank that replaced it for me. I'm getting Kings of War in. So I've got 3 fantasy-focused ranked and flank games. Padre's looking down at the End Times book. I actually watched a great video with Andy Law about how much he hated how the End Times were done. You can look up, if you look up Lawhammer on YouTube, you'll be able to find that. But GW decided that that was not the end of its fantasy line. They put out Age of Sigmar, which, strangely at first, the lore was very confusing, it was very lacking, and over several editions of the game, the lore of what happened after the old world was destroyed kind of coalesced to something really cool. It's like somebody took the old world and ground it up into a fine powder, added a bit of heavy metal and possibly a dash of cocaine, snorted it all, and then gave birth to the Age of Sigmar, because this game has some deep ties to the old world, but is nothing like the old world. The Age of Sigmar is a game of high fantasy, craziness that is going on. It is a very metal game. You're not playing rat catchers and flagellants. You're playing Stormcast Eternals who have been reforged multiple times on the anvil of Sigmar and birthed out into this super being. You're not playing High Elves, you're playing the Lumineth lords who have these ties with these elemental beings, or the Ideneth Deepkin, elves who have to take soul tides from others to fuel their own existence because their souls were fractured. Slaanesh ate all of the elven souls, and Teclis and his brother went to find the gorged and bloated body of a chaos god and ripped open their belly and pulled out the souls and reforged the elven race. The dwarven slayers now brand themselves with gold runes that are the body of their dead god to give them power. And you have dwarves who are flying around in airships and using, jump jets, and it's crazy pants. And that's what we're talking about today. Not the miniature game, but this game, Soulbound, the Age of Sigmar role-playing game by Cubicle 7. Perilous Adventures in the Mortal Realms. And today we're just going to give kind of an overview of the game. Thursday we're going to look at the setting, and next Tuesday we're going to look at the mechanics. Hopefully it'll be just a brief overview into what Soulbound is. But JN, you're saying if they blew up the old world, what world does this take place in? Well, if you're familiar with Warhammer Fantasy, you're familiar with the winds of magic. The 8 strands of magic, 8 flavors of magic, each with their own focus, each with their own mage order, College of Mage in the old world. Well, those winds are now realms. They're sort of planes, if you will. One of the things that attracted me when I first started looking at this, I bought the book because, let me just say, out of all the gaming companies out there, the quality and beauty of Cubicle 7's books, I'm going to argue, are beyond compare. Beautiful artwork all the way through, very well written, very well researched, very steeped in the lore. The mechanics are great. And what's interesting is they keep iterating the mechanics. So Wrath and Glory bears a lot of similarities to the Soulbound system, but is refined. Warhammer Fantasy 4th Edition is kind of a great version of the D100 old Warhammer 2nd Edition. But even as the books have come out, Up in Arms, the military book, revises a lot of the rules that a lot of people had complaints about, if you will. And then they took all of that and they reformed it into their new 40K game, whose my brain just, it's something maledictum. Rook, thank you, sir. That's awesome. Grom and Becca, welcome to the subscription. So the bestiary is great. Yes, the Skaven are so much cooler in Age of Sigmar. So when I got this book, I got it because it looked beautiful and I wanted to see what it was about. And the Age of Sigmar lore was very hard for me to track down. So I knew a role-playing game would have it all condensed. But then I realized it has a lot in common with Planescape. The idea is the 8 realms are the 8 winds of magic. So you have the main book covers Akshi, which is the plane of fire. And it is just this vast expanse with deserts and firestorms racing and where it kind of touches on other realms, verdant forests overgrowing. But if you head to the realm of beasts, you have just, megafauna going all over the place. The realm of metal, Shaman, the realm of metal, is just this weird, ever-changing sort of metallic quicksilver, beautiful place. Then you have 8 points, which is sort of like Sigil, the realm where all of these places touch, but it has to be defended because if Chaos gains access to 8 points any more than it currently has, it can access the 8 realms even easier. So with its draw from Planescape and its draw from the old world, it was very easy for me to fall in love with this. And as Phantom pointed out, the Skaven Well, the Skaven don't really have a home. They chew tunnels through reality and have warrens that link the realm. These rat men uh, are even crazier than they are in the old world. And to be fair, in the old world, if you play through, slight spoiler for Enemy Within, if you don't want one, jump ahead. Uh, they try to take the moon out with basically a giant warp stone laser cannon. So the Skaven were already pretty crazy to begin with. So this is what we're going to look at over the next couple of behind the screen episodes. This heavy metal, high fantasy, high weirdness game of post-apocalyptic. Malice, the world that was, is gone. What's left are these planes of magic. And what you play in these games are what are called Soulbound. When Sigmar began to reconquer the 8 realms that had fallen under the control of Chaos, he did so with a pantheon of order, which included some gods which you may not necessarily consider as part of, being on the side of order and good, like Gorka Morka, or it was the god of the Uruks, the orcs, or Nagash, the god of death, undeath. But at that time, it was everyone versus Chaos, because Chaos had just destroyed the world. And in that time, they formed what are called Soulbound, where they take exceptional individuals from all of the different walks of life and bind their souls together and to give them something, access to soulfire, making them greater than the number of their parts. And then they set them with a task. Now, we'll talk more about the setting on Thursday, but this fell out of practice for a very long time and has recently been brought back into practice. So that's it. That's the Soulbound. You are a group of close-knit, maybe you don't have to like each other, not close-knit like that, but bounded metaphysically together to go out and do the will of the gods, to stand against Chaos for a specific task sent out into the worlds, in order to do this. Now, Chaos being what it is an ever-present threat, and it's actually more of an unbounded threat than it was in Warhammer Fantasy. In Warhammer Fantasy, they were constantly the enemy within, if you will. They were hidden. You had the big Chaos threat in the Chaos Waste to the north, but in the Empire, they were an insidious, subtle threat, constantly seeking to undermine and weaken the world around them. In Soulbound, while there are still subtle and insidious threats, Chaos is off its chain. Archaon is battling with the forces of Chaos in a very real way across the 8 realms. Yes, Paradox, in this game, you are on a mission from God. I don't think rations come in whole fried chickens and 4 slices of plain white toast and a Coke, but maybe in your game they will be. So let's see here. We got some chat that I've been ignoring because I was kind of in the zone talking about this. They said, Padre said they teleported Skaven Blight into the Chaos Realm and it lies behind the 8 realms. Yes, the Horned Rat has definitely become a full Chaos God in Age of Sigmar. Skaven destroyed a city with the giant Warpstone bomb. So yeah, the Skaven added this. I always loved the Skaven. I never wanted to play the Skaven, but I always loved the Skaven because they added this weird steampunk, weird tech to the old world, right? The Empire, Black Powder level, late Middle Ages, early Renaissance level technology. The dwarves had their even further technology. And then the Skaven were just like, yeah, we're just going to punch a bunch of weird stones that have fallen out of the sky into machines and make them work. The Screaming Bell. Yeah. By the way, Phantom, unfortunately, I have returned to the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. They had a deal on the Leviathan box that I just could not pass up. So my son is currently, there are just Tyranids all over my gaming table. And then I am assembling some, what I think I'm going to paint up as Death Watch Space Marines in the background. Gorka Morka is the best. They are the best boys. And so one of the things that I love about Padre, after snorting this warp dust, I see how I can pull the Chaos Moon down to the planet. Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things I love about Soulbound, and that I love about Cubicle 7, is Cubicle 7 is deeply in love with the Warhammer and Warhammer 40k properties. So we'll go over some character options next Tuesday, but they just keep putting out more. In the Champions of Order book, they expand the Forces of Order, giving you more options. In the Champions of Destruction, if you want to play orcs, you can. In the Champions of Death, which is almost its own different way to play the game, they unlock all of the different undead types as playable character archetypes. One of the things I love about the undead is the flesh courts, the ghouls, flesh eaters in Age of Sigmar are all under this mass delusion, and they basically, having to eat their own kind, broke their minds. And so they all see the world through almost a Pendragon-like lens, where they are these noble knights and high lords and ladies who are going out to do battle against, evil foes, and they're bringing back these great carcasses of the great beasts to have these great feasts. When in reality, they're flesh-eating ghouls whose minds have just snapped under the weight of their curse. And as part of the Soulbound, your delusion is starting to waver. You're starting to see yourself exactly for what you are. I think that's a fascinating character archetype to play. Now, we've all been waiting for Champions of Chaos. And Champions of Chaos kept growing and growing, the guys at Cubicle 7 said, until they realized that there are some core mechanical assumptions of Soulbound that don't work if you're playing Chaos. If you're going to play Chaos, you really need those core assumptions to be radically mechanically changed. And so Champions of Chaos is going to be a separate rule book. You can't play Soulbound with Champions of Chaos in the same group, or maybe you can. I haven't read the book yet. But the idea is that if you want to play a Chaos-focused game, you're going to have your own rule book for that. I will have to pick up or send pics of Leviathan, especially when we get them all primed and painted. Yes, Stars and Scales allow you to play the Seraphon, which is just awesome. So what is something cool and beautiful and interesting about Soulbound? Well, if you haven't been paying attention to everything I just said, one of the things I love about Cubicle 7's Warhammer games, or really any Warhammer games, they're just the owners of the license right now, is that now all of your minis serve dual purpose. You can play Age of Sigmar and take all of those minis and use them in a game of Soulbound. And one of the cool things is all of the character archetypes map one-to-one to minis that are available for Soulbound, or for Age of Sigmar. You want to play Stormcast Eternal? You can find a mini for your exact type of Soulcast Eternal archetype on the GW website or at your friendly local game store. It's cool to be able to take these tabletop miniatures that we've been using, throw them onto the field, and play a role-playing game with them. I mean, it goes back to Space Hulk and the idea that, hey, we could play Space Marines in a more board game sense. But now we have Wrath and Glory. Imperium Maledictus, I think, is the Maledictum, is the new 40k role-playing game. And what's interesting about the whole genre of role-playing games at Cubicle 7 is you have low fantasy, Warhammer, fantasy roleplay. You have high fantasy, Soulbound, Age of Sigmar. You have high epic sci-fi in Wrath and Glory. The characters in Wrath and Glory are, I would say, kind of mechanically on par with Soulbound. They are a much tougher, much robust, a more heroic version of a party going out into Warhammer 40k. Um, but now with the new rulebook, we're going to get the grim dark version of 40k. So whatever your flavor of Warhammer that you like, whether it's 40k or fantasy, whether you want a grim dark version of the rules or a high heroic version of the rules, you have options. They're just sort of laid out for you. So that's it. That's my overview of Soulbound. We're gonna look at the setting a little bit more deeply on Thursday, and then the mechanics and character options on Tuesday. I think they did some really interesting things with the mechanics. I found them a little bit fiddly when I read them, but the more I ponder over them, the more I really like it. So thanks to everybody who's tuned in here live. If you are watching on YouTube or later, please leave a comment. Let me know what you thought. Let me know what you want to hear about in Soulbound. Again, everyone who voted online, thank you. We're going to be doing some look at Wrath and Glory here toward the end of September, starting into probably a pretty hefty series on Warhammer 40k. In December, we're going to be looking at the Malazan Books of the Fallen, the whole Malazan series, and what we can pull from it for gaming. And then I think starting next year, we may do a look at some, like a second edition AD retrospective, Imperius Maledicta. We'll do another poll, see what people are interested in. So, that brings us to the end of today's show. Yes, Phantom, I agree. IM really brings back the Dark Heresy feel. Padre, Humble Bundle, if I hear about a Humble Bundle or a bundle of holding for any of the Warhammer stuff, I will make sure to mention it. But that's it. Thank you all. I hope you guys have a great week. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay gaming. Until next time, you know what? Have a good one.